Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review, and I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing The Godfather. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. The aging patriarch of an original crime dynasty in post-war New York City transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant youngest son. So let's begin with my first pro. But before we do, in the words of Lucas Brasi, Don Corleone, we are honored and grateful that you have invited us to your home on the 50th anniversary of this film to review it. With that out of the way, let's begin. This movie, of course, this year it turns 50 years old. It's a very iconic movie. So much that even nowadays, pop culture still references this movie in many ways. From The Simpsons to any cartoon that we know, even cartoons such as the Animaniacs, they reference movies like this, especially like The Godfather. Well, The Simpsons has even gone as far as to actually pay homage to it more than 2 times. For example, the episode where Lisa gets a pony, she wakes up and the head of the pony is in bed with her, and it's basically a reference to The Godfather. Also, there's the whole episode where Fat Tony is put out of commission and Bart and Homer take over the operations. That whole episode is basically The Godfather. And at the end of that, Fat Tony tells Michael that he is proud of his son. Then Lisa sees Michael leave and says, "Did you tell him that it was an accident? Right? It was an accident." And then he turns to Lisa and says, "Don't ever question me about my business." And he walked to another room, and we see the same scene as the movie, how the movie ended with the doors closing and they open up again. It's kind of a funny parody. This movie is so iconic that you see references everywhere, especially famous lines everybody keeps repeating. So many things that remind you of The Godfather. Even other movies are based off The Godfather or series like The Sopranos. And talking about famous line, I'm pretty sure anybody that knows The Godfather and you ask them, do they have a favorite line? They sure have a favorite line from the movie or the trilogy. But even if they haven't seen The Godfather, I'm pretty sure they're familiar with the phrase, "I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse." Next point, the cast. It's such an amazing lineup and are forever going to be remembered for this movie. Same goes for the director, Francis Ford Coppola. His vision and screenplay are going to be timeless. This story is forever going to be remembered. And also, same goes for the score. I mean, if you ever play any part of the score anywhere else, people will automatically know it's from The Godfather. This whole idea of it being iconic, I can't get over it. Anybody who knows movies knows The Godfather. Next point is going to be the story. The story includes all the members of the Corleone family, but at the same time, it's about Michael and how he goes from being an honest person who just came back from the war. He wants to be a standing upright citizen doing well for community, as well as trying to find his wife and start a family and have a decent, honest life. But we see him change from going from that to being a cruel and taking the side of the family business while pushing his wife away by actually keeping her in the dark about his business. So this shows you how one person can actually change from being good to bad just as long as they're pushed close to the edge and they're basically bound to fall into the darkness. Now, moving on to my cons. Main con that I have is the length of the movie. I know it could have been cut a little bit here and there, but for it being a trilogy, the movie was quite long. I could have done without some scenes. For example, when Vito Corleone was having his heart attack, that scene kind of lingered too much since the beginning, and I could have done without that and just have him basically playing with his grandkid and then all of a sudden having a heart attack, somebody rushing to his side, and that would have been enough for me to know what was going on. And some of the scenes when Michael is in Sicily, I could have done without, or they could have shortened it, especially, since that whole wedding with the girl over there didn't basically do anything. She was in and out pretty quickly from the story. I mean, it's nice that he wanted to have a wife from Sicily, but for him to come back to the States and actually marry his old girlfriend, I mean, we could have just done without that wedding from Sicily. But I'm pretty sure that this is probably in the book or somewhere in the script, and it has a reference somewhere for the directors. As long as they could have cut some scenes, I would have been happy. This leads to my next con, that I would have liked if they added more scenes to other parts of the story that weren't clear enough to viewers. For example, how did Don Vito know that Brasini was behind all the killings? we need to see something of him pulling the strings, and then for Don Vito basically to say, this is what he did, and that's why I know it was him, instead of just saying it wasn't so-and-so, it was Rossini all along. Or they could have shown how Soloso, the guy who wanted to start up the deal with Don Vito for the drugs, how did he become to do business with the family? We never saw him before. We don't know anything about him, especially since he's not really a Sicilian. He's a Turk. We should have established him, how he came up so close to making a deal with the family. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend Touly and see how he saw this movie and what grade he gave this movie.
As Sal mentioned, The Godfather is a pretty iconic and influential film in the movie industry, with pop culture references still be made up to this day. Sal already mentioned some examples, but one of the big themes that the movie centers around, which revolves around the mafia, it had such a big impact in the movie industry that this movie can't be ignored when it comes to the significance that it has played since its debut. It's not to say that there hasn't been any mafia types of movies before this one, but this is definitely one of the films that really set the tone when it was made. So that's definitely one thing I have to give props to this movie, and it is probably my biggest pro about this film. Whether or not the film delivered in terms of the many aspects that the film should have, from pacing to character development to the tone of the movie that was trying to set, the storyline, whether all those things were done to a degree that would deem it an excellent movie. Well, I'll talk about how I feel about some of those components in a bit, but I just want to mention first and foremost how, again, influential and culturally relevant this film is. And that will always be the big reason I look at this movie as being significant and a must watch if you are into movies. First time I saw this film, I didn't expect Michael to turn out to be sort of like the main character at the end, because I thought it was going to be more of like a family sort of like thing where it did bounce back between a lot of the characters. But the movie, to me at least, definitely made it seem like it was Don Vito, the father, the head honcho of the family. I thought that he was going to be the main character. And then when there was the attempted assassination of him, then I thought, okay, that will set off the domino effect to probably have somebody else take over the business. And in this case, it was Sonny. And I kind of felt that way given the way he was trying to take over the family and give orders and all that stuff. But as mentioned several times throughout the movie, Sonny acted more on emotions versus a more calm and strong-willed minded person, which ironically Michael somewhat turned out to have some of those characteristics, which then of course led him to being the head of the house towards the end of the film. And so the build-up from the beginning of the film, introducing us to the various characters in this movie, especially on the Corleone side of the family, to other members of the mafia from different regions of the area, up to like about the halfway point of the movie, I was really on board. I just wanted to know more about the characters, who they were, their motivation, and I thought the movie did a terrific job. And given that the movie was about 3 hours long, the fact that up to about the halfway point, it held my attention for that long, again, I gotta give the movie props for that, because I thought the pacing was gonna get kind of messy, which to me, it kind of did after that halfway point. As I go into maybe some of my cons about the film, and this started when Michael was sent away for his own protection after he went after the crooked cop and Salazzo, which again, execution of the plan, how they carried it out, how Michael tried to stay as calm as he could, despite this being sort of like his biggest moment up to this point of his life in terms of taking over the family business, as he whispered to his father at the hospital that, you know, he's going to take care of him, whatever. This was sort of like his big moment to shine, in which he was able to execute the plan through. How they led us to that moment, I loved. But then when he went to Sicily, and Sal mentioned the whole marriage thing, it felt very rushed at this point. It felt like the time jump was very noticeable, where at points I couldn't tell, oh, did a month have passed by or even a year has passed by? So we started getting these time jumps, and this is where the movie started losing me, because I couldn't get a sense of where these characters were in terms of their development. It was always, oh, this is who they were already at this point. And then we jump, a year forward. I am to just accept that between that time, they have become this person. But instead of showing me that, I have to just accept it, because this is how the movie is being shown to us now, versus being in the moment, just like how the movie was for up to that halfway point to when Michael did what he did and had to leave to Sicily for his own protection. I wasn't a big fan of the marriage either for a couple of reasons. Again, it happened too fast, and I didn't really believe in the sort of relationship that was developed between Michael and the woman that he married. Let alone, I thought to myself, did Michael completely forget about his girlfriend back in the States? Did they already break off, or what's going on there? So, I was sort of scratching my head there. And then when Michael returned to the States, it was already like over a year or something, and that was when Kay, his former girlfriend, I suppose, because he was already married in between that moment when he went to Sicily, when Kay found out. And I was sort of like in Kay's shoes. I was like, whoa, wait, Michael's been back here for like over a year? That's really odd, really. Again, throwing off like the pacing and who the characters were at that point. Because to me, at that point, Michael felt like he was already a very different person from when he was in Sicily. Like there was that, again, year or over a year's time where something happened to Michael to have made him a more extreme person. I can probably reason, okay, maybe it's because of the death of his wife or the fact that people are still after him and his family members. Like those are the things that I'm assuming is happening. But I would like to see scenes where maybe he's reflecting on these sort of things. Like maybe he's staring at himself in the mirror or something. I just needed a moment alone with him to really understand what it is that he's feeling versus assuming, which to me is a bad sign when it comes to me trying to get behind a character, whether the motivation of the character is good or bad, which then of course will influence the sort of person that will become. In this case, Michael turning out to be a very intense and soon to be extreme head of the Corleone. And so because of this sort of transformation that we're seeing from Michael, it at least in some aspect throws off the believability of who these characters are at this juncture of the film. Even a character like Kay, who was trying to deny Michael's proposal to her, she just accepted and just, gets in the car and ended up getting married. To me, it would have been believable if Kay just said, you know what, no, Michael, we can't do this, and then she just walks away. And then if later Michael comes back to her and keeps pestering her, not from the loving vibe that you got from the beginning of the film, which that you saw between the two characters, but maybe from, again, that sort of personality that Michael now has as being a little extreme, and maybe he uses that to his advantage or leverage to get Kay to marry, then I would probably accept that a little bit more because it would match with Michael's character. But here, Kay just did like 180 despite me getting this vibe that I thought she wasn't going to go through with it. But in that one scene, all alone, she goes ahead and decides that it's okay to marry him. And then of course it comes back to bite her at the end of the film, in which she asks that question, and Michael of course lies to her, and despite giving her the option to ask him one time about his business. And so I think Kay realizes that he lied to her, or at least I hope so, because if she doesn't, she's just as naive as the sister in this film, Connie, who's been abused by Carlo. Again, a pair in the movie that was pretty significant at the beginning of the film because that's where the whole introduction of the family came from. It was due to their wedding. So again, these characters, it's not so much of who they become that bothers me. Actually, I did enjoy, again, Michael becoming who he is, but it's how they got there at that point. And again, from the beginning of the film to about the halfway point to when Michael did what he did at that restaurant, that was great. Like, I love the movie up to that point. But afterward, it started to fall apart for me. Not to the point where it was like unwatchable or I deem it bad, but it wasn't to me as high quality in terms of pacing, character development, believability as it was from the start of the movie. So where Michael ended up in the movie and how the movie ended, again, very iconic and very intense. The look that Kay was giving to Michael, again, whether or not she believed in what Michael said or not, I felt like she didn't even need to ask him the question. His sort of mannerism in the room when he was telling her not to ask him about his personal business, that to me should have been enough for her to know. So again, I don't know what's going on with that character or what they were trying to do. And of course, again, a lot of jump cuts into like different times from that point forward. I could do it maybe a one or two, but it felt like there were so many of them that felt like they were all over the place. And some of the scenes, I felt like they didn't flow well either. Like I said, the movie is still culturally relevant, so I can't ignore that, despite some of the faults that I mentioned. But at the same time, if I'm gonna give a film a grade, I have to be honest. And unfortunately, it's probably gonna disappoint a lot of people out there. I'm gonna be a little harsher because, like I said, I'm gonna judge it from a movie perspective in terms of elements that I feel what makes a movie great. I'm gonna give the film a 7 out of 10. Still a great movie, but I feel like the movie was starting to unravel about the halfway point, in which if the movie was able to be a little more precise and not have too many time jumps, I felt like the movie then would have been a better experience.
So I agree on some points that Touly made, especially the Sicily time skip. I could have done without that completely. I could have just seen him arrive there and basically go into hiding. There's no wedding. There's no him going on little hikes through the Sicily landscape. But this movie, I think it's really iconic. This movie established what I would say the mold for most characters. For example, Clemente's characters, Tesso, Carlo, Fredo, even Connie. That's like an iconic character there. Even Michael and most of the people in this movie, like that's what a mobster looks like, or that is how a mobster acts. Even when you talk about Luca Brasi, the power, the muscle, that is where it comes from. Like Touly said, it is an iconic movie. There is some scenes that I can do without, but for me, I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I like the story, how it was filmed, especially the dark scenes, because that is a reference to the Corleone's family doing shady business in the darkness of the society. So I guess that does it for this review of The Godfather. Please join us next time where we're going to review The Untouchables from 1987.
I had a rough day on the job.
Are you going home now?
I was about to.
Well then, you just fulfilled the first rule of law enforcement. Make sure when your shift is over, you go home alive. Here endeth the lesson.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.